What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Tondo's Linux. So this past week was actually a pretty solid one for Linux news. We've got a major LTS Beta drop from Ubuntu. The kernel drama is continuing with 7.0 RC6. Kali Linux brought back something from the past that I think a lot of you are going to love. And NVIDIA released a new production driver with some genuinely useful improvements. Oh, and Krita finally made the jump to Qt 6. That one's been a long time coming. Let's get into it. Starting with the big one, Ubuntu 26.04 LTS Beta dropped on March 26th, right on schedule. The codename is Resolute Raccoon, and the final release is set for April 23rd. So if you want to help test it before it lands on millions of machines, now's your chance. What's actually in it? Well, the headline is GNOME 50. And this is a significant shift. GNOME 50 drops direct X11 support entirely. If you're running an X11 application, it'll still work, but it goes through X Wayland. The native X11 session is gone. Beyond that, you're getting Linux kernel 7.0, still a release candidate, but that's expected to go stable before the final Ubuntu release. Mesa 26.0 for graphics, Python 3.14, and GCC 15.2. Benchmarks from Phoronix are already showing nice performance gains over Ubuntu 25.10 on AMD Ryzen 9000 series hardware. So if you're on a recent AMD system, this one should feel noticeably snappier. All the official flavors are available for testing too. Kubuntu, Lubuntu, Ubuntu Budgie, Ubuntu Studio, and the rest. If you're the type who likes to test betas, this is a good one to kick the tires on. Now, speaking of Linux 7.0, Linus Torvalds dropped RC6 on March 29th, and he's not entirely happy about it. See, RC5 last week looked like things were finally calming down. Linus himself said it seemed like the cycle was settling. But then RC6 arrived with a surprisingly large number of fixes, and Torvalds called the previous week's calm, and I'm quoting here, mirage. What's interesting is where all these fixes are coming from. Normally, drivers make up more than half of any kernel update. In RC6, drivers are only about a third of the changes. The real action is in file systems, specifically Ext4 and XFS. Ext4 got a bunch of critical fixes: crash prevention when you unmount a drive right after changing settings, memory leak fixes, and a deadlock fix involving in-order reallocation. Not glamorous stuff, but exactly the kind of thing you want fixed before a major kernel release. Audio also got a lot of attention. If you've got a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 or 2i4, first generation, there's a fix in here for distorted audio. Asus, Lenovo, and HP laptop users got some new hardware quirks added, and the Star Labs Starfighter laptop had an annoying speaker pop on startup that's now fixed. Torvalds is still planning RC7 for April 5th as the final release candidate, with Linux 7.0 stable, likely landing around mid-April. He says most of the changes are small and benign, so he's not extending the cycle, but he also can't make firm promises yet. Alright, this one is going to hit different if you've been in the Linux security world for a while. Kali Linux 2026.1 is out, and the headline feature is something called BackTrack mode. For those who don't know, BackTrack was the predecessor to Kali Linux. It was the go-to penetration testing distro before Kali took over. And the Kali team has brought it back as a nostalgic mode that transforms your desktop to look and feel exactly like BackTrack 5. Same wallpaper, same color scheme, same window themes. It's essentially a time machine for your desktop. You can enable it from Kali Undercover, which is the existing feature that already lets you disguise Kali as a Windows desktop. Now, BackTrack mode is another option in that same toolkit. Beyond the nostalgia trip, 2026.1 also brings 8 new security tools, a fresh default theme for 2026, and it's running on Linux kernel 6.19 LTS. If you're a security professional or just someone who remembers the BackTrack days fondly, this is worth a look. NVIDIA released their new production branch driver this week, version 595.58.03. This is the stable R595 release building on the beta that came out a few weeks ago. So what's actually new? The 2 Vulkan extensions that are worth knowing about, vk_ext_descriptor heap and vk_ext_present timing. If you're a developer or a gamer who cares about frame timing, the present timing extension is particularly useful for smoother frame delivery. Wayland users get something practical here too. Improved fallback to system memory when your VRAM is running low. Previously, this could cause your Wayland desktop to freeze. That should be fixed now. There's also Wayland 1.20 support, DRI3 version 1.2, and support for the newer GNUC library 2.27 and Zorg server 1.1 Nothing earth-shattering, but it's a solid, stable release. If you're on NVIDIA and you've been holding off on updating, 595 is a good one to move to. Krita 6.0 is out, and this is a release that's been years in the making. The core change is the full port to Qt 6. This is a big deal because Qt 6 brings native Wayland support. And I mean actually native, not the it kind of works situation we've had for a while. Krita 6.0 implements the full Wayland color management protocol, which means proper HDR support and fractional scaling on high DPI displays. The text tool has been completely rewritten. You now get on-canvas editing. You can type and edit text directly on your canvas without a separate dialog box. There's also wrapped text, text on path, and full OpenType support. If you do any kind of lettering or comic work in Krita, this is going to change your workflow. One interesting thing, the Krita team released Krita 5.3 simultaneously. That's the Qt5 maintenance branch for anyone who needs to stay on Qt5 for compatibility reasons. So you've got two top-tier versions available right now. For most people on a modern Linux system, Krita 6.0 is the one to go with. Two Canonical stories this week that are worth talking about together. First, the good news, Canonical joined the Rust Foundation as a gold member. That's a $150,000 per year commitment. This isn't just a symbolic gesture, it gives Canonical a seat at the table for language governance, and it signals that Rust is going to play an increasingly important role in Ubuntu's future. We're already seeing Rust components replacing GNU utils in Ubuntu. This formalizes that direction. Now the more controversial story, Canonical has proposed stripping GRUB down to the bare minimum for Secure Boot in Ubuntu 26.10. The idea is to ship a minimal GRUB specifically for Secure Boot scenarios, which would remove support for LUKS encryption, LVM, CFS, and several other features from the Secure Boot path. The reasoning is security. A smaller GRUB means a smaller attack surface. But the community reaction has been mixed. A lot of people use LUKS full disk encryption with Secure Boot enabled, and this proposal would break that workflow. To be clear, this is still a proposal for 26.10, not something that's in 26.04 LTS. But it's worth keeping an eye on, because if it lands, it's going to affect a lot of setups. Before we wrap up, let's run through the quick hits from this week. Firefox 149 is out with a native split view feature. You can now browse two pages side by side without any extensions. Firefox 150 is already in beta, and it's bringing the GTK emoji picker to Linux users. LibreOffice 26.2.2 landed with more than 80 bug fixes. If you're on 26.2 update, GIMP 3.2.2 is out with various UI and UX improvements. Tails 7.6 adds automatic Tor bridges, so if you're in a region where Tor is blocked, Tails will now try to connect automatically without you having to manually configure a bridge. And KaOS Linux 2026.03 continues its journey away from systemd. This release drops systemd boot and mknitspio, replacing them with the Limine bootloader and Dracut. It's running Linux 6.19 and Qt 6.11. KaOS is doing something genuinely interesting with its desktop stack. Worth watching if you're curious about alternative approaches to the Linux desktop. That's the Linux news for the week of March 23rd to 29th, 2026. Honestly, a solid week. Ubuntu 26.04 LTS is shaping up to be a really good release. The GNOME 50 Wayland only direction is a big shift, but it's the right one. And Kali's BackTrack mode is just fun. Sometimes it's nice when a project does something just because it's cool. If you found this useful, hit the like button. It genuinely helps the channel. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's a good time. Drop a comment below. Are you testing Ubuntu 26.04 Beta? And what do you think about Canonical's GRUB proposal? Reasonable security hardening or too disruptive? I'm curious where the community lands on that one. I'll see you in the next one.